Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of Contented Narratives, where we'll be looking at Holes by Louis Sacha. I'm pretty sure I said his name wrong, but as you know, I'm not very good with names. Now, it was published in 1998 and was adapted onto the screen in 2003. Now, as always, I will be looking at four things. I'll be looking at the plot, I'll be looking at how good is the film, how good is the book, and of course, overall, how well does the film take from the book. Now, do bear in mind that there will be spoilers within this episode, as I do discuss the film and the book in its entirety. So as usual, we will start off with the plot. Now, with the plot, the film starts with a boy deliberately getting bitten by a rattlesnake to get out of Camp Green Lake, and then a shot of Stanley Yelnats being hit over the head with a pair of sneakers. But obviously we call them trainers, so from this point on I'll be calling them trainers. And then he consequently gets arrested, and then he ends up sort of going through court and ended up at Camp Green Lake. Now the book, however, starts with a description of the camp, and then Stanley on his way to the desolate place. So we don't really see, obviously in the film we see more of the court case before he gets sent to Camp Green Lake. In the book, it's just sort of he's at Camp Green Lake, and then we kind of see in flashbacks the court appearances. But obviously we do hear mention of his no good pig stealing great grandfather, and that is mentioned quite a lot within the book and the film. But it also mentions as well, one small thing is it does mention at the beginning that Stanley is a lot larger than the average boy, as it were. And obviously as the time goes on he gets fitter and slimmer and healthier, but that is quite a big difference that I think I would mention straight away. Now in both we get introduced to the boys, so you've got like X-Ray and Armpit and Zero and just loads of weird names. Stanley ends up being called Caveman at one point, and Bathbag is the one that deliberately got himself chucked out of the camp by standing on a rattlesnake. We also get introduced to Mr. Sir as well, and Mr. Podansky, who is nicknamed Mum, and he's like the camp counsellor. We also hear of the warden, but are not introduced to her as yet. So then Mr. Sir basically tells Stanley what he's there for, and he's there to dig a hole each day, every day, 5 meters down, 5 meters wide, and your shovel is your guide, basically. So then we see it in the film, as I said, we saw it before he went to the camp and then after as well, but in the book we get flashbacks of him being in and out of court, being found guilty of stealing Sweet Feet's shoes, traders, and then being sentenced. You can either go to prison or you can go to Camp Green Lake. So he chooses Camp Green Lake, because what boy wouldn't? So then we learn of the story of Stanley's no good pig stealing great grandfather. Now, he was in love with a woman who was a moron, absolute idiot. And I'm not doing this to sort of like, belittle any women or anything like that. I'm literally just saying she is an idiot, and you'll find out why in a moment. So, he wants to, he's the first Yelnat, he wants to marry this girl. He's quite handsome, he's easy on the eyes, and then you've got his competitor, who's Ivan, who's a pig farmer, who is larger than you would expect, quite sweaty, quite ugly looking, and that will come in important later. So then he goes to Madame Zeroni because he wants to win the heart of this woman, basically. She tells him to go off to America and forget this woman. He can't. So then she says, right, take this little pig, the runt of the litter, carry him up the mountain every single day and sing this song to him. And then, every day until her birthday, and then you will win her hand. But once you have done that, you need to come back and you need to carry me up the mountain and sing to me, and then I will be big and strong as well. So he goes up the mountain every day with this pig, and he sings to it every day until the day before Myra's birthday, because on Myra's birthday he didn't want to be smelling like a pig, and that's the big mistake that he makes. So he then takes the pigs weigh exactly the same, so then he turns, so then the farmer says to the girl, Myra, who do you want to marry? Now at this point you'd think you'd choose the quite handsome, quite literate, quite strong man, but she can't choose. She's stuck between the two. So then obviously he gets very disheartened and turns around and goes, do you know what? Keep the pig as a wedding present, I'm off, and disappears off to America. But he forgot to take Madame Zeroni up the mountain, and sing to her while she gets better, which means that he and his family are cursed forever, basically. So in the book, it's told sort of like over the period of a couple of chapters. In the film, it kind of dips in and out, as it were. But yeah, so he forgets to take Madame Zeroni up the mountain, and so his entire family is now cursed. Now, in the film, it does take longer for the boys to accept him as one of their own. So when Stanley first arrives, they kind of like belittle him and, you know, I mean, they are delinquents. They are criminals. Stanley may not be, but they are. So obviously, you know, you've got you've got this idea that, you know, that they're trying to figure out who he is and what he's about, basically. In the book, however, they seem to accept him on the first day and give him the moniker of caveman, as it were. They're still a little bit mean to him, but they accept him more into their arms straight away. Now, in both, Zero asks Stanley what it was that he was accused of stealing, so that gives you an idea that there might be more to Zero than meets the eye. So anyway, so Stanley starts digging holes. He thinks he's found something interesting when he found a fossil. However, obviously it didn't get him the day off. Instead, one of the other boys, X-Ray, comes over and says to him, look, I've been here forever. If you find anything interesting, give it to me. I'll say I found it, and then you can go off and just carry on. Don't you think that's fair? Stanley obviously doesn't want to rock the boat, says yes, and that comes back to bite him in the bottom. Well, actually it works out quite well for him. So then obviously they continue digging, you know, a bit of bravery, camaraderie. But then you've got Stanley then finds a gold tube a couple of days later with KB inscribed on it. We find out later it's a lipstick case, but at that point the boys aren't entirely sure what it is. So then he has to give it to X-Ray. Now, as X-Ray's coming over to claim it, Stanley's like, well, that's not fair, I found it. And X-Ray's like, excuse me, what did you say? So then Stanley's like, oh, well, you know, maybe claim it that you found it the next day because your hole's almost finished. So if you do it the next day, you get the whole day off rather than just a couple of hours. So, you know, X-Ray's like, fine, you know, I'll keep it and everything like that. Now, while this is all going on in the film, we're also getting this love story between Sam, who's a black man, and Catherine Barlow, who's a white woman. Now, normally I wouldn't mention race, but it's very important that you realise that Sam's black and Catherine is white because of the repercussions that happen later. So you see this blossoming romance. You see, you know, Sam and Catherine falling in love, and then they end up kissing, which is illegal for Sam to kiss Catherine, but not for Catherine to kiss Sam. So obviously at that point, you know, it is really cute and everything, and you just see this sort of like this blossoming romance, and that's kind of going on in the film. So anyway, so we go back, and in both the book and the film, you've got X-Ray then claims he found the gold tube in his hole the next day, which makes the warden like super excited. She comes out, she's like, yes, you know, gonna fill up everybody's water bottles, gonna go all day, gonna dig on this hole. So they end up expanding on that hole. Obviously, Stanley realises that they're digging in the wrong place. And he keeps looking back to the hole where he actually found the lipstick case, but obviously he can't say anything. So then they continue to dig the hole. They're clearly looking for something. But after about 4 days or so, they go back to digging their own holes because the wardens realise there might be nothing there and has decided that it's a waste of time. At this point as well, we also see in both the book and the film that Zero has started to ask Stanley for help to read because he doesn't actually know how to read. So then Stanley at first is like, no, I'm sorry, I've not got any time. I'm so exhausted. I'm not going to do this for you. He changes his mind soon because one of the following days, one of the fellow boys, Magnet, steals a bag of sunflower seeds, which Mr. Sir eats instead of smoking. And because he does this, he steals it from Mr. Sir's truck. They're passing it around to each other. They throw it to Stanley and it upends in his hole, basically. So Mr. Sir comes back, you know, angry and everything like that because obviously, you know, someone's stolen his sunflower seeds. So anyway, Mr. Sir then sees them in Stanley's hole. Stanley turns around and goes, you know, oh, I stole them on my own, just me. So Mr. Sir takes him off to see the warden. The warden gets really annoyed. She paints her nails with like venom, with like rattlesnake venom, and then she backhands Mr. Sir and tells Stanley to basically go back to his hole because she is not bothered. So that kind of happens. Now, in the film again, we go back to this blossoming relationship, but it's been spotted by a gentleman who wanted Catherine's hand in marriage. So because he's seen Catherine kiss this black man, and this black man is less than he is, and why is she kissing this black man? He then destroys the schoolhouse that Sam has helped build. He kills Sam's donkey, you know, and basically he goes out to kill Sam. So Catherine goes to plead with the sheriff to help, and the sheriff goes, "I always get drunk before a hanging." Catherine then realizes, oh no, they're literally going to go kill Sam. So she runs out, and in the film, I'm stressing in the film, she sees Sam get shot while out on the lake by this gentleman. So then the next shot, you see her come in, and, you know, she says to the sheriff and everything like that, do you want that kiss now? And the sheriff's like, yes, please. So she kills him and kisses him, and then becomes the outlaw kissing Kate Barlow. KB, lipstick case, I think we know where we're going. So that's sort of going on in the film at this point. So anyway, so in the film and the book, Stanley goes back to his hole, and he realises that his hole has been pretty much dug for him completely. So he says, thank you very much, you know, looks around the boys, and then it's Zero that's dug the hole for him. So he then sort of finishes off the day, goes off, and then Zero goes, if I dig part of your hole, can you teach me to read? So Stanley goes, yeah, I don't see why not. You know, the hole's being dug, it doesn't matter who does it. And so then agrees to teach Zero how to read. However, Stanley is now enduring a bit more torture from Mr. Sir because of the whole backhanded gashes across his face kind of feeling, which I don't really feel for Mr. Sir. He kind of deserved it, do you know what I mean? So now in the book, at this point in the book, we're getting the story of Sam and Kate. And due to the tragic end of Sam, in the book, however, Catherine and Sam are both in the boat when Sam gets killed. So that's a little bit more sort of like heartbreaking. But then she becomes kissing Kate Barlow. But she's also the one that robs but does not kill Stanley's great-grandfather, Stanley Elnats the First. But then you learn that she buried her loot somewhere in the dry riverbed of Camp Green Lake, and you realise now why they're digging for holes. So again, we're flashing back to that previous, you know, little gold case that got found in a hole, and you're thinking, I can see why the warden was getting excited. So then we find out as well that Zero's real name is Hector Zeroni. So clearly something is at play there. Something has caused Stanley Elnats to end up at this Camp Green Lake with Hector Zeroni to maybe put right the curse that was put on them all those years ago. So anyway, we then get the scene where Stanley's getting picked on because Zero is digging some of his hole. So then Zero tries to strangle the other boy because the other boy's having a go at Stanley, which causes Podansky and the warden to try and sort things out. Zero then says he's not going to, you know, dig another hole. He's absolutely sick of it. Smashes Podansky in the face with a shovel and runs off into the distance. Now, bearing in mind, this is basically like the middle of a desert. Pretty much. There is nowhere for Zero to run at this point. But he's off. He's running. So then the warden and the other adults decide to delete all records of Zero ever being at Camp Green Lake so that no one will know he was ever there and that no one will ever come looking for him. Stanley, however, starts getting the urge to go after Zero. So after the few days, and when a new boy called Twitch comes in, he then steals, or tries to steal, the water truck and drives off to try and find Zero. Only, obviously, he wasn't keeping his eye on the road and he ended up in a hole. So he didn't end up with a water truck. Again, this is very similar in both the film and the book as well. So then he then decides to continue on foot. And as he's running out into this dry expanse of riverbed, he finds Zero under the Mary Lou, which was Sam's boat. Mary Lou was the name of his donkey, which unfortunately got murdered. Unfair. So then they find this sort of like this peach thing that they called sploosh. They kind of drink it, and then they realise they can't really go back. Like, Zero's refusing to go back to the camp. So then Stanley goes, oh, I think I can see God's thumb from here, which is how his great-grandfather survived. After he got robbed and left in the desert by kissing Kate Barlow, he goes out to God's thumb and survives up there. So they decide to try and make their way there. Now, it is a long and difficult journey for both of them. At one point, Zero does collapse, so Stanley then carries him the rest of the way up to the top. When they make it to the top, Zero admits that he stole the trainers that Stanley was arrested for, but Stanley's like, no, it's fine, don't worry, I feel like I was meant to be here anyway. So as he's doing that and they're eating onions and drinking water, Stanley then sings the old family song that he got taught from his father and his father before that and his father before that, that was told to sing to Madame Zeroni when she got carried up to the top of the mountain. So as this happens in the film, you see at this precise moment, because at this point as well, I should have mentioned that Stanley's dad is trying to find a way to recycle old trainers. And then at the point where, you know, the curse is lifted, as it were, Peach falls into the thing, and then he realizes that peaches and onions will actually stop foot odor. So you can see that happen in the film straight away. In the book, you don't find out about any of this until like later on, because it focuses mainly on Zero and Stanley. So then, because of that, a lawyer then tries to come and get Stanley, and again you see this happen in the film. And the warden goes, well, you have to come back with a warrant, blah, 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 chases her off. In the book, you don't hear about it until, again, Stanley comes back to the camp. So Stanley and Zero start digging in so Stanley and Zero at this point realise, you know, they start talking about everything, and they realise that actually, if they start digging in the hole, there might be something there that would basically stop them being murdered by the warden, which is a fair assumption, seeing she's deleted all of Zero's records. So they go back under the cover of darkness. They cover of darkness, couple of days. They go all the way back down to the mountain, go all the way back to the camp. They go into the original hole and they start digging. Now, they then pull out this trunk. And as they pull out this trunk, you know, Warden and Mr. Sir and Podansky to show up. And they're just like, oh, great. Well, I'm glad you boys are alive. Give me the trunk. Then as they're going to go in to get the trunk, the yellow-spotted lizards, which are mentioned throughout the book as being the most venomous things ever, one bite and you're gone, they show up and they just sat all over Stanley and Zero in the trunk. So obviously at this point, oh, excuse me, that was a hiccup then. So at this point, obviously the warden and Mr. Sir and Podansky are like, we'll wait it out, you know, they'll disappear eventually, or they'll kill the boys, we can get the trunk afterwards. However, this doesn't happen. Sunrise comes, and then the lawyer arrives, and it's like, you get these boys out right now. And then the warden's like, well, these boys stole the trunk from my place. I was coming. They fell into the hole. This is my trunk. I want it back. So anyway, Stanley at this point is like, that's a lie. That's not even true. Comes out of the hole. Then Zero realizes that Stanley's first name is his last name spelled backwards. So he then reads the name on the trunk and realizes that the trunk belongs to Stanley. So anyway, so they, you know, then the warden is still trying to claim it as her own property and saying that, you know, oh, you know, I keep the trunk, I put my stuff in it. No one's having any of it. It's clearly been locked for years. And then everything kind of goes wrong, because then obviously Stanley realizes that he's been released, and then he says he's not going without Zero. Well, Hector. They then try to find the records of Hector and realise that Hector doesn't exist on the system anymore because they deleted him. So Hector's then free to go, because obviously you don't know how long he's been there, you don't know how much time he served. So they do that, and basically the camp then ends up under the state, rather than being run by herself, by the warden. So then it's all happy ever after. They get a fair bit of money from the chest. In the film, they make it seem like it's absolute billions. In the book, they say it's more sort of like $1 million each, which is still nothing to laugh about. I would love to have $1 million. But, you know, so they have that happy ever after. I did forget to mention, however, that we do find out that Zero obviously got left behind by his mum as well. And he said that if he should ever have any money, he would hire a team of private detectives and he would find his mum. And by getting the money, he was able to hire a team of private detectives and get his mum. So then we find out about the whole sploosh foot odor thing, which then gets them loads of money coming in. And all is right with the world. And Hector's got his mum back, and Stanley's back with her family, and everyone seems happy ever after. And it's a nice ending. So overall, the plot is pretty much exactly the same. Apart from obviously the storyline. So that it tells 3 different stories, and it intertwines a bit more in the film. Kind of cuts between the 3 stories a bit more than it does in the book. In the book, it's kind of like this story, then halfway through it's this story, goes back to the first story, then gets to the third story. So obviously they've kept the plot the same, but they've just kind of moved it around a bit. But I do think they've taken a lot of the plot and done it successfully to the screen, so I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Now this film still gets me every time. Honestly, it's such an amazing story. It really is. I love the nuances that come across the screen. So, you know, with the character interactions and the fact that, you know, you drops little pieces of information that you can just pick up on along the way, and I love it. I really do. It's a great story. It's got love, it's got adventure, it's got 3 stories in one, which you can't laugh at, really. And I enjoy this film, and I can go years between watching it, and yet still, as soon as I watch it, feel like I've watched it literally yesterday. So I would definitely recommend this film to anyone, and I would give it an 8 out of 10. Now, this book was covered in English at my school, so I really love the story within its pages. So much that when, you know, at school where you read a chapter at a time, that frustrated the hell out of me. It honestly did. And so they would read a chapter at a time, but I'd already read the entire book. I literally took it home and finished off the book completely. So, you know, I was I quite enjoyed it. The intricacies of the plot are divine, and when you're reading it, you're really brought along for the ride with Stanley Yelnats. All the little coincidences that happen kind of get you going, and then you kind of wait for the characters to realize that this has happened, and it keeps you onto the edge. And honestly, by the end of the book, you feel very content. It's completed, it's a happy story. And even though Kissing Kate Barlow, you know, lost her love in Sam, and Stanley Yelnats pig stealing great-great-grandfather didn't get the one that he thought he loved, everything worked out for the best, and that really sat well with me. So I'm going to give the book an 8 out of 10. Now, overall, how well did the film take from the book? Really well, really well. They kept the setting the same, they kept the plot pretty much the same, they kept all the characters the same and everything that happened. They didn't skirt away from anything. And I think, obviously, apart from making Stanley thinner in the film from the beginning rather than showing him losing weight, I kind of understand why they did that. Because obviously you can't guarantee that this kid, because obviously the actor's not actually going to be digging those holes every day, so you know, you can't guarantee that a child will lose weight. They could have maybe put him in a bit of a fat suit at the beginning, but it's a little thing. They also did, for some unknown reason in the film, have Stanley's great-grandfather, but sorry, have Stanley's grandfather, but for some unknown reason they didn't have that in the book mentioned. So I don't know why they added him, but he was a nice little added there. So I'm gonna give it. It was overall a very true adaptation, so I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Now, this is my own opinion. If you agree or disagree with anything I say, please leave it below in the comments. Do click subscribe to be alerted for any videos, and obviously join me next week when we're going to be looking around the contented narrative around Kiss the Girls by James Patterson. But until then, in these times, remember to always keep it contento.